This is Coda Radio, episode 122 for October 6th, 2014. Hi everyone, and welcome to Coda Radio, Jupiter Broadcasting's weekly talk show taking a pragmatic look at the art and business of software development and related technologies. This episode is brought to you by our two fine sponsors, DigitalOcean and Linux Academy. I'll tell you more about those great sponsors as this here show goes on. My name is Chris, and joining us every single week is our excellent host, established on the East Coast, Mr. Dominic. Hey there, Michael.
Hello, hello.
Hello, sir. How are you doing on this fine Monday?
I'm great, although I opened the show with a cough because,
Because you're not so great, but you put on a good front, and we appreciate it. We appreciate it.
Well,
I was thinking, too, as we establish our maiden voyage on Monday here, we've always been the start of the Jupiter Broadcasting Week, right? It goes out with the Linux Action Show, and we open it up with Coda Radio. I don't know if that's always going to be the case. I feel like there could be a change in the wind. I don't know what direction on that time, but I feel like
there could be, too.
Yeah, so we'll keep the audience posted on that. I've had a hell of a morning. I'll tell you what. We'll get into the development stuff, but I just have to share the story with you really quick. So after the Linux Action Show on Sunday, I was running really late. The show went long, and then we had some tech issues afterwards that I had to resolve before I could head out. And so I was about 25 minutes late, and I needed to get home so my wife could get to a remembrance. And I felt pretty bad that I was holding her up because she was kind of part of the crew or whatever that was put on the remembrance. So she was kind of needed. So I rushed home, and I just burned through the last bit of gas in my truck. And as I was pulling into my driveway last night, the little countdown that tells you how many miles are left on your tank says 3 miles. Well, the nearest gas station's like 6 miles from my house. I was like, oh, crap. But I needed to rush into the house. Well, so I forget all about that come Monday morning. And I have a morning talk show that I have to be on the air at 9 a.m. for. And so it's about a little after 8, and I get in my truck and I turn it on, and I instantly remember, oh yeah, I'm out of gas. So I turn on the truck, and good news, it comes on and says, you have 15 miles left on the tank. And I'm like, okay, all right. It's like, well, I just found like an extra $20 in my pocket. Like, this is awesome. I could even get to the studio if I wanted to, but I'm not going to risk it. I'll take a little extra time this morning. I'll go to the gas station, the one I like, not the one close to the house. So I get going down into town, and I notice that it starts ticking down a little quicker than it should, as often happens on a low tank. And it gets down to about 10 miles, and I'm like, oh, geez. It gets down to about 9 miles. I'm like, oh, man, well, good thing the gas station's right over these train tracks. Right as that thought goes through my head, railroad, ding, 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 and the arms come down, and a coal train starts coming through town. And I'm sitting there idling, and the truck ticks down to 8 miles, 7 miles, 6 miles.
Oh, no.
5 miles, 4 miles. And what's going through my head right now is I'm already late to get to the morning show as it is. So now I might run out of fuel, right? And now I'm really starting to worry.
Yeah, now you're toast.
Right. So just as it gets to 3 miles, the arms go up. I go over the train tracks. I get gas. I get into the studio. Everything works out. We wrap up. I'm already feeling rushed, though, right? So we wrap up the Tech Talk today. Everything goes fine. It was a good episode. And I get some food. I start cooking. I turn the oven on because I'm going to cook bacon in the oven. I go upstairs. I start poking through the Coda Radio emails and stuff. Start kind of putting a show together. Power goes out. Power goes out at the studio. Only goes out for 30 seconds. You wouldn't think that's a big deal? Well, you see, in the studio, some stuff's on UPS. Like the expensive stuff is on UPS. It's more to protect the equipment, right? Not necessarily out of functionality.
Right.
And other stuff is not on UPS. Well, the studio has a specific order of events. Things have to be turned on for the capture to work and everything. So the whole studio was in shambles because part of it's on, part of it's off, and nothing's talking to each other anymore. So then I spent when I got off Tech Talk today, between trying to make bacon even though my oven turned off halfway through, and then trying to get that going again, and restoring the studio right up to this point. It has been one of these days, Mr. Dominic. One of these days.
That sounds like a whole lot of Chris Fisher fun.
I know. That is, there you go. There's life of a podcaster, everybody. And then apparently the video stream kind of is blipping out on people too. And I don't even know what's going on with that. I don't even know. Beside myself. All right, well, maybe we can get into some feedback and distract me from it. Matt Indie Dev, who wrote in last week, I believe, about the Google Play real address identity thing. He was clarifying us on some of the questions we had, because honestly, I had not really looked into this because I'm actually I'm such an extreme hipster right now that I'm rocking Android L on my Nexus 5 on Ting with F-Droid for my App Store. I'm like not even living the Google life. I'm not in the Play Store anymore. So I'm not thinking about the Play Store. I don't develop apps. So I haven't really followed the story, but Matt wrote in to clarify a few questions we had last week when talking about it. He says, hey guys, I just want to make sure you got it straight. If you look at the AndroidAuthority.com article on Google forcing developers to publish their home address, in the screenshot that they include in the article, if you read this fine print, it says, after you have added an address, this is from Google,
Right.
it will be available on your app's detail page to all users on Google Play.
Well, that's fantastic.
So they publicly will be posting the addresses. Now that is astonishing.
So that has to be like legal pressure. That has to be, if you want to sue a developer, it's, since many of them are like just one dude in a basement somewhere, no offense, you want an address, right?
And I wonder, though, why is that not something Google could just have on record and retrieve when, a legal precedent required it? Why does it have to be something, to me, what it seems like it's going to force developers to go get like a P.O. box somewhere?
That's probably exactly what it's going to force them to do, right?
Yeah. I'm not, anyways. So he goes on to say, once you see that, that's the whole point of why I got upset. As Mike said, all stores require an address for billing or selling, but to publish it publicly is just ridiculous. And there was a couple of other people in our subreddit who weren't like super fired up about it, but they made the point that like Google has built the Google Play Store off the backs of developers, and now that they've got it established, now they're sort of ratcheting up the control and what they want. And it's like, you wouldn't even be where you were at if it wasn't for these developers. And now you're kind of screwing them.
Well, are they screwing them, or is it like, I guess they kind of are screwing them, right? Like Google Play made it super easy to do whatever you wanted. Quality be damned, right? Copyright be damned. And now that's not going to be the case.
Yeah. That's a good thing in some sense. I mean,
right.
I think the Play Store needed some cleanup.
It's funny because I am running an Nexus 5 now, and there are some, like, as an end user, weird disadvantages to Android. Like every Thursday you open up the iOS App Store and there's some new interesting apps. In Android, I feel like that's less of the case.
Yes, for sure.
So maybe this is just an attempt to kind of clean up their act.
That's an interesting point. I definitely, have now rocking the iPhone and the Nexus 5.
Right.
And then on top of that, on the Nexus 5, now using the F-Droid store, which is very utilitarian. No fluff, no big banners, no top lists other than popularity just based on downloads. Very, very minimal, and not like no ways in there from what I can know, like some of the apps that you kind of come to expect, but then also apps that are awesome too, that for geeks are really good. And it's been really interesting to look at the iOS App Store versus Google Play versus F-Droid, and just this massive spectrum. And I think in terms of what like the average person who would buy a Nintendo or a Nintendo DS, I think Apple has that experience a lot more locked down. And Google has this can be my entire computer for my life experience a lot more locked down, I think. There's a lot, you can get a file manager, you can get all this stuff that's just not even an option in iOS.
Yeah, I think that's pretty fair. I don't know which approach is better. It's kind of like the system where you're going back and forth between what's good, what's not good.
It totally depends on your needs. Do you want this as sort of a fun entertainment info device, or do you want this as it can be fun and entertaining, but it can also be sort of a utilitarian utility belt type? It's your Batman belt. And actually, I would argue that while it might sound like I might fit into the latter category, I think I'm more of I just want to have some fun, and I want it to be simple enough to make, some basic things, but I don't need very much complexity. And so that's why I think I've been trending more towards iOS, and although Android L is very nice. Android L is unquestionably the best Android ever.
Whoa, the best
Yeah,
Android ever.
Yeah, big time. Yeah, and that's I think unequivocally. I think it's the best Android ever. It looks the best. It performs the best. The battery life is the best. A lot of the little things like the notification tray drop-down stuff that used to bug me is all fixed. Just little nice touches to UI freshness, like you tap a menu and it slides down real smooth and nice, and there's a little bounce effect. This is Google is coming with some competition with Android L. After using this for a while, I definitely think it's the best Android ever.
Those are wow. Those are some fighting words there.
Yeah, now I'm not saying it's the right OS for me, because one thing that's been interesting about my experiment with L, and maybe it hasn't given me a complete picture, so I need to kind of put this out there, is I have not associated this with any Google account. So, and to that end, Android L ships with about, I think I counted, this is a little rough because I've installed a lot of apps since then. Out of just stock, though, Android L, I believe, shipped with 32 apps. And I think, including the calculator, only 2 of them didn't require a Google account to fully use. And I'm also, even Chrome, because Chrome keeps prompting me to sign in with a Google account, even though I can use it, and Chrome is better with a Google account.
Right.
So L is very, very, very closely tied to Google, and I've been using OwnCloud and F-Droid for a little while, and I don't know if it's because I'm not syncing to Google, but my battery life is just unbelievable. It is. I feel like I got a brand new phone out of my battery life. So right now it's been off my charger for 16 hours, and I have 40% of my battery left.
Excellent.
Yeah. I took it off my battery. I took it off the charger yesterday, a little bit after the Linux Action Show, I think, and haven't put it back on my charger since then. And that's with installing apps and playing around with F-Droid and all that stuff. So L is bringing it. All right, Eugene writes in, weird requests from potential clients. I really want to hear what you think about this one, Mike, because I've been in the same situation. He says, have you ever had a client ask you to take a personality test? And what should I do if I get such a request? Run away? What if the contract is less than 6 months versus like maybe a 5 or 10 year contract where maybe I'd be more willing? What are your thoughts, Mr. Dominic?
No one has ever asked me to take a personality test.
Would you do it?
No, I don't think I would. That's some weird stuff right there.
Yeah, so I have been. It was so when I was an employee that was sent out as a contractor. So they contracted me out.
Right.
Which is was a great way to kind of learn the ropes and then go off and do my own business. But one of the things that, like, they brought in this guy that they thought was like this business genius, and the owners really respected him. And I didn't know. But one of the things he recommended to them is have all your staff take a personality test. See where everybody lines up. And I was young back then.
Oh, God, you needed the money.
I got pretty offended. And, I took my boss into his office, and I was like, we got to talk about this. And I brought him into his office. And I really laid into him about it, because what I believed, and I actually think it did happen, is then they put you in a box. And, like, for example, if I just say I prefer iOS, right?
Right.
And then now, next episode, I criticize Android. What's the natural response? Oh, well, he's an iOS guy.
He's an iOS.
Now I'm in a box, right? I'm in a box now. Even though that's not fair, even though I can objectively, like, I just got done complimenting Android, right? But I still think at the end of the day, I prefer iOS 8. Although that's not even a firm position. But yet, now I'm in a box. And that's what I was worried this personality test would do, was put me in a box. Oh, well, yeah, Chris has a hard time doing this, or Chris is best at this, so let's give him all of this. Like, there's two sides of it, too. It's not just what are you weak at, but what are you strong at? Where do you excel at? And, or like, oh, well, Chris's personality type isn't good at organizing documentation. So then all of a sudden that becomes the thing that they mention on my review every single year, because now they know it's something they can have me work on. Whereas before they would have had to sort of flounder around to find something. That's what I was worried about. And I don't think that happened to a full extent, because the people that were running the tests went into it saying, all right, these, you can't put that much stock into them. So they considered them. And I think maybe they changed their approach to working with us a little bit. But at the end of the day, I think it really matters on how much the people that are reviewing the test take them seriously. If they take them with a grain of salt and just maybe consider reformatting how they run meetings, that's okay. if they use them to inform how they should interact with you and judge you, that's a problem. And I don't know how when you're interacting with a new client, you make that determination. Other than if it's a short-term project and it's good pay, well, then who really cares? It's not like you're there for the rest of your life.
I think you care, to be honest with you.
Well, if they're not going to, yeah, I mean, it depends on how, if they're kooky about it and you think it's going to, then you got to just trust your instinct. I don't know. Like, I've worked in some kooky places, man, that were good clients, but I wouldn't want to live there.
Yeah.
You know what? You know who you kind of sound like a little bit right now. You sound
What's
like.
that?
I will. Hold on, guys. Come on. There's just.
That's your president there.
Yeah, I don't know, man. If somebody slapped down a personality test, that'd probably be that for me.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think that is a fair response.
I think that's like just one of the things you can't really go back from.
Yeah, and I tell you, I was pretty pissed off when it happened. I don't normally make a habit of screaming at my bosses. And the thing is, sometimes when I get into it, like, I can't stop myself. And back then especially, like, I just keep going and going and going and just digging down. And like, and then I was like, oh wow, so now they're going to see something on my personality test and that'll just, that explosive session. And the reason I did is because I felt betrayed at the time. Because we were working good, everything was going really well. And then all of a sudden they brought this guy in who's like, well, why do you have so much stock in this kid? Like, why you need to make, like, this guy sort of brought in this doubt and all of this. I don't know, like, it just made it eventually changed. It did kind of lead to changing the tone of the relationship long term. Not just because of my outburst, but also because they got spooked a little bit that, they thought they couldn't rely on me. They didn't think I was reliable, which is ridiculous because I had been working there for years at that point.
Well, yeah, so. I mean, there are certain things I think, like, both the employer, like, you can't go back from, right?
It seems like a bad management move.
It seems like a management move. I mean, it's hard to criticize your former employer without, knowing everything that, say, the owner of the company or whatever would have known, right?
Yeah.
Like, were they bleeding money and were they just looking for excuses to fire people? I mean, that's possible, right? Were they, or maybe they had some extra people on staff that they didn't need. Because in my mind, the only reason you bring on consultants and make people take a personality test is an excuse to fire people.
Well, and part of it too was, like, at the time these owners had their own load of clients, and they were all underperforming what my revenue was, and so they were really, and one of them in particular, my direct boss, was really underperforming. By, like, he was pulling in 20% of what I was pulling in, and I think there was pressure on him to sort of clean up some of the slack there and take less dependency off of me as a revenue generator for the company. And their way to cope with that was, well, let's figure out where we're not syncing up. And it was just this weird, like, I don't know. It was sort of like, let's defer the problem into some sort of hocus pocus test that will help us better align our work styles or something. And when really what it was is the guy just didn't work very much. Yeah, it does sound like a little bit like Office Space. You see, that's why I get bitter.
Well, it does, right? Though it feels very arbitrary, I guess, in my mind.
Well, and I just don't necessarily even know if I believe in those tests being very accurate, because I could answer it today and it would have a completely different answer than maybe a week ago. Really, I mean, it depends on your frame of mind when you take the tests, how much sleep you've had, all of these factors.
Right.
All right. It seems like I don't know. Okay. Well, we got a couple other really good emails to get to. In fact, a question that I think is going to be right up your alley. But before we get to that, I think maybe we'll take a second and talk about our friends over at DigitalOcean. DigitalOcean is, well, actually, I was going to say it's my little secret, but it's really not so much a secret anymore. Mr. Dominic knew about it before I did, so I don't think it was much of a secret then either, but it really has enabled us to expand some of our functionality, especially some of the back-end processing stuff, in a really straightforward and cost-effective way. So if you're not familiar with DigitalOcean, I'd recommend you go over there right now, DigitalOcean.com. That's DigitalOcean.com. And DigitalOcean is a simple cloud hosting provider dedicated to offering the most intuitive and easy way to spin up a cloud server. You can get started in about 55 seconds. However, James sent us an email today. Coder Radio listener James got his droplet spun up in 33 seconds. That's awesome. And here's what you get. Starting at just $5 per month, 512 megabytes of RAM, a 20 gigabyte SSD. DigitalOcean is all SSDs, one CPU, and a terabyte of transfer. That SSD is going to give you the I/O density that an entire RAID array used to be required to get you that kind of performance. But what is really also kind of key about DigitalOcean is right off the bat, just for $5, you're going to get a terabyte of transfer. That's like the starting transfer, which is incredible. And what's great about that is it's really fast transfer. DigitalOcean has data center locations in New York, San Francisco, Singapore, Amsterdam, and London. But I think what's really my favorite thing and really made me sort of continue to when I need to solve something by spinning up some back-end infrastructure, I go to DigitalOcean, and a huge part of that is because of this control panel. The interface is so simple and intuitive, but yet extremely powerful, and power users can replicate the control panel on a larger scale using DigitalOcean's straightforward API. This is a great way to integrate it with a management infrastructure or just to script backups. You know, you could script the snapshots because you can back up your DigitalOcean droplet. That's a great way. Like, before I installed the next version of, there was a point release to OwnCloud 7, and now I'm using OwnCloud enough. I'm like, I don't want to risk just updating this without taking a snapshot. Well, DigitalOcean makes that so crazy straightforward great. And so I just took a snapshot, ran the update. Of course, there was no problem. But if I did have any problems, I knew that dashboard would make it super straightforward to just go right back to where I was. And with private networking, you can do some really nice like back-end stuff, have a front-end web server that answers requests and delivers the results, but can query a back-end SQL server that isn't exposed to the public web. And the other really cool thing about DigitalOcean is because that's a private connection inside their data center, they're not charging you for that transfer between the front end and the private machine. That's huge, right? That's huge. If you put a database or you put some files on that back-end system, that's a really big deal, especially if you're doing some front-end caching. That could get nuts. That's just the beginning. They have one-click deployment of things like GitLab, WordPress, Ruby on Rails, all of that. You can really get going and just start working on your project immediately. DigitalOcean.com. And here's what I want you to do. Use their special offer code. Now, we're in transition between months right now, so use the promo code CODERSEPTEMBER. And if you're kind of listening to this a couple of days after we published, Coder October. I know it's challenging. It's one word, all lowercase, Coder October. You'll get a $10 credit. Then you can try out DigitalOcean for 2 months for absolutely free with that $5 rig. DigitalOcean.com, Coder October, when you check out. And a big thanks to DigitalOcean for sponsoring the Coder Radio program. Rocking like 3 droplets right now. Kind of nuts. In fact, sometimes I spin up more and then just destroy them when I'm done. Okay, so our next email comes in from listener Lee. And Lee says, what's the proper way to structure a business case to document? So say structure a document for proposing a business case for a software project. He says, hello, I got a question for Mr. Dominic. I'm in college for a software engineering degree. I'm on a project to build a CRUD app, C-R-U-D, CRUD? I don't know, a CRUD app for administrative tasks.
Just a basic database app. So write, create, read, update, delete.
Yes. Very good, sir. He says, before we can start building this, we have to pitch our app to our customer through a business case. Here is the problem. School never explained to us what a business case exactly is. I structured the document in a way I thought was appropriate, but I still had a no-go. I asked for feedback and I made some required changes, but I still feel like I have no clue what I'm doing. Here's the question. Do you have for me the proper way to structure a business case document for a software project or a good reference book which I could follow with guidelines? Thanks for the show, and hope you will make longer episodes like you used to. Oh, sorry, man. Well, we always structure to whatever the content is. All right, before we started having a little connection troubles, I was talking about the need to build a business case, and I was saying we have these 40 servers, and I identified this is how much they cost us to run, this is the management requirements, the power draw, and this is why it's a bad thing. Here's my solution. Yes, it's going to cost this much up front, but long term, I believe we can have a huge savings, a huge return on investment. We'll be able to save power, save management, reduce complexity, et cetera, and identified how we'll reduce complexity and why that's a good thing. I built the case, the reason. I mean, do you think I'm nailing that? What am I missing?
Well, yeah, I agree. I mean, I think the business case is ultimately just the why, right?
Now, he's talking specifically about a document. Now, I feel like that's kind of a construct of the school because, like, my document would be tailored to the client specifically, and I would just, like, I'd often have, like, an intro page and, make it nice. And
we don't have, like, a specific format for that kind of thing. And oftentimes it depends on, like, if you're bidding on a contract or something like that, it depends on how they want to see it, right? For instance, like, a lot of the times we might do, like, a quick PowerPoint, right? Or something like that, but there's no, like, Word template that's business case.
Right.
Maybe your professor, to the writer, maybe your professor has one he wants you to use.
Well, it doesn't sound like it, does it?
Yeah, I've never heard of, like, a formal document in a template being called the business case.
Yeah, right, exactly.
Right.
The business case.
And to be honest, the best business cases are usually pretty simple. Like, it will save us X dollars in the long run.
Right. I think maybe he's overthinking it to an extent. It really is. You have to appeal to the basic requirements and needs, and that's all you're doing, is building the case for that.
Yeah, it's like it'll either save us money or allow us to do something new.
It's in the word business. What is the case for the business? What's the reason? And you get that settled.
What's the reason?
Yep. Very much so. All right. While we still have connectivity, we'll get to we actually have a couple of, like, Hoopla blowout. So, you know what? Before we get to that, since we had a little break in between, I want to mention our next sponsor before we get into this Hoopla stuff. And a lot of the Hoopla this week came from the subreddit. You guys really came through with some great topics, and one that I'm all fired up about. I got a little rant going at the end of Linux Action Show last week, and I'm kind of curious. I have a feeling Mr. Dominic's going to have a 180 take on it. So before we get to that, I want to talk about linuxacademy.com. Sponsors of the Coder Radio program, linuxacademy.com/coders to get started, where you can save some money. And they just rolled out a brand new update to their site. They are awesome. Look at this site. If you guys have been seeing the Linux Academy spots for a little bit here on Coder Radio, you're familiar with the old site. This is looking so good. And it really now, the quality of the site matches the quality of the materials on the back end. When you log into Linux Academy, you get step-by-step video courses for all of the content they have. Downloadable comprehensive study guides. And it comes with your own server. When the lab requires it, they'll spin up a server on the back end for you. And I like that they've started they have Linux so well covered, and they've expanded into OpenStack and DevOps and AWS. The DevOps training might be particularly of use to some of you out in the Coder Radio audience. So remember, go to linuxacademy.com/coders. You can run any 7+ Linux distributions when you take one of the Linux courses. When you do the AWS courses, and a lot of the other courses too, they'll do scenario-based training, so you implement the entire stack, you walk through the whole thing, and you've actually delivered a product at the end of the course, which means you're going to be prepared when you have to go put something in production because you've already done it once before, and they're spinning up the virtual systems for you as you go in the courseware, telling you right where you've left off, and now they're integrating something brand new called lesson plans. These are learning plans that allow the user to select their daily availability, which I love because, you know me, I'm kind of busy, and then they will automatically adjust the courseware to match your plan. It's generated for you, it's custom tailored to you, and learning plans can give you lessons and quizzes and labs that can be due on each day, which they can then send you reminders, or you can spread them out depending on your availability. It's really cool. And you can keep going. When you log back in, you can just resume right where you left off, and they give you a little time and say, okay, if you've got 20 minutes tonight, take this. It's a great way to stay fresh on your skills, keep yourself competitive, and I also use it to kind of dabble in new technologies. Like, I never really had a chance to play with OpenStack in production, but now I can go over to Linux Academy. And since all of the courseware is always available to me because I'm a subscriber, I subscribe to Linux Academy myself, I can just try anything I want. That's huge. That's huge too, because they're always learning they're always adding new courses, so you can learn new things all the time. Go check them out over at linuxacademy.com. Go visit the new website and go to linuxacademy.com/coders to get the special discount. Go over to linuxacademy.com/coders, and a big thank you to Linux Academy for sponsoring the Coder Radio program. Okay, Mr. Dominic, I got a couple of things I want to bounce off you. First of all, a lot of theories are going around why Microsoft skipped Windows 9 to Windows 10. The one that seems to be gaining the most traction with our audience in particular is this Well, it was called a rumor. I don't know if I agree with that, but here it was. Is a Microsoft developer explains in a Reddit thread why Windows 10 is called Windows 10, and he says the internal rumors were that early. Now he's saying, the Microsoft dev is saying, internal rumors are that early testing revealed how many third-party products had code that checked for if Windows 9, then assume it's 95 or 98 and bail. And so because in testing enough applications detected the 9, they decided to go to 10 to avoid this problem. So my question to you, Mr. Dominic, A, do you believe it? And B, what are your thoughts about the new version number? I know it's a weird question, but I don't know. I have some thoughts. I want to hear what you think.
I don't think that's the real answer. That seems super silly.
Thank you.
Wait, you think it is, or you think it's not?
It's crazy silly, but I figured everybody seems to be buying into it, so I thought, okay, maybe Mr. Dominic buys it. You know why? I was kind of like, is that legit? Here's what sold me on it. Ray Ozzie tweeted on Twitter that he wrote code that checks for 1. And there's going to be software out there that's looking for the version 1 and will bail. So it's a silly argument to begin with.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't think so. Honestly, to me, this is like the simplest question on the planet, right? They did it because the Windows 8 brand sucks, and 10 is further from 8 than 9.
Yeah, but doesn't that show kind of I don't want to be too strong here, but doesn't that show like a really weak hand? Kind of a little pathetic?
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, okay. All right. I was just expecting you to defend it. Okay. I don't know why. It's just sometimes when I go
I probably would have done Windows 9 because, some concession to the market, but I certainly don't think I would have done this. I don't know. This whole play is a little weird to me.
Well, now, not just to bash, though. I was looking today at some of the new features that are coming to the console, to the command prompt in Windows 10. It's actually looking like a pretty damn good terminal with some nice features, including
Windows 10 looks like a great update for like the developer or the pro user.
For the pro Windows user, yeah. Okay. All right, next Hoopla topic. We're banging these through because I'm currently sending you 20% packet loss, so I have no idea how long it'll hold up.
It's pretty rough, but let's do it.
All right. So Yahoo, discontinuing Yahoo. Hi, Mike and Chris. It's been a long time since I contributed. Well, thank you, Savage Tiger, for writing back in. He says, the projects we work on at our company are usually really JavaScript heavy, and to structure all the code, we use a framework. As you know, and have been discussing on the show, there are a whole lot of frameworks popping up that use different philosophies. So which one did we choose? Short answer, the wrong one. Long answer, Yahoo User Interface 3, YUI 3. It has been around for a long time and therefore is rock solid. It has small community but a big company behind it internally. Also, it's really extendable, so we can make our own components. He says, I think Yahoo's in rough waters, though. Last week, news came out that Yahoo was discontinuing most of their services, and I'm really not sure what to do now. It looks like they're killing this. Even though I'm sure we can still get some mileage out of YUI 3, we started moving away immediately. We're starting to rebuild on top of Angular JS, but the difference in design philosophy makes this very hard. For example, there are no serializable rational models, and where UI3 uses a traditional object-oriented design pattern, AngularJS is bidirectional, binding-based, and it's a night and day difference. AngularJS is also extendable, so I'm bolting on my own solutions for missing functionality. But as you can imagine, it's really time-consuming. So what he's saying is, hard times are ahead, and we kind of made the wrong bet. And he wanted us to kind of discuss this a little bit. And I look at this, and I think of like folks that have, I don't know, I was kind of looking into this perhaps in light of our discussion around Xamarin, or Xamarin, however I'm supposed to say it, and how, that's a really expensive wrong bet to make that sometimes you don't realize until you're way deep into the project. So Is it just one of these things where you cut your losses and move forward? Where are you at now with that? Is there any updates you have on that? And do you have any thoughts on Savage Tiger here?
Yeah, I mean, the Xamarin issue is a little different, right? So they did try to push a patch that fixes some of the issue, but not the core, kind of leaks memory all over the place. The issue with, I think the real question is like picking your tooling, right? Because it's kind of a delicate balance between you need to pick tooling so you can offer more efficient work, whether that means a shorter deadline or cheaper bill, right? That's the only reason to use any of these tools. his position sucks even more because, well, Yahoo, if they really do drop it, then you're alone, right? It's kind of terrible. I don't know. This is something I've always struggled with, because you could say, okay, we'll always use open source tools, and you'll have the community, but there are some really shitty open source tools, right?
Yeah, and communities.
And communities. I don't know. This is something more and more I keep finding that just using the platform vendor's toolchain is probably the least painful path for most things.
And of course, they want it to be that way as much as possible.
Right. Like Apple, Google, Chrome. Everybody's incentivized to make their tools not suck if it's supporting their platform. Where if you're a third party, particularly in the case of Xamarin, you're probably more incentivized to tick off the box and kind of keep up with the platform vendors.
Right.
Like I'll give you an example. iOS 8, certainly on the consumer side, has some issues. On the developer side, it's pretty damn solid. Right? The new APIs are pretty good. Now, of course, the fact that the updates broke people's phones is terrible. They had nothing to do with the developer tools, right?
Yeah, it's true.
Like Xcode used to be a steaming pile of shit, but now it's actually one of the better IDEs out there. And that's because Apple is super incentivized to get this right.
And they're competing, right?
They're competing with Google.
And it's a different kind of competition.
Yeah.
And that does make a difference.
Certainly, I see a lot of value in using the toolchain, using the software provided by the platform vendor to get that really good experience.
And see, it depends, of course, like when you're talking mobile versus web and things like that. But also,
well, even on the web, though, right? You could make the same argument of like, oh, well, we're going to use this crazy JavaScript sublanguage instead of JavaScript. Like you're taking developer convenience, but then you're relying on this third-party vendor who may or not be very good at what they're doing, right?
Well, and I was going to say, like, you mentioned it, but because of this competition and this continual incentive to move the platform tools forward, like, they've come a long way, where some of these problems are not as pronounced as they used to be that using the platform tools has. So I wonder if that's a bit of it, too. But you can see the situation he's in where they kind of, they're using JavaScript and they have this really great system in place, and then things change. And in this case, it's no longer in Yahoo's interest to push that forward. Right. And that's the problem.
That's kind of the end of the conversation, right?
Yep.
Marissa Mayer's had enough, Mommy's had enough, and you're screwed.
So on the topic of open source communities, this is our last kind of hoopla blaster topic before we lose connection. Lennart Pottering, I'm not sure if you're familiar with him.
I'm a big fan. I actually I don't remember what talk it was, but he destroyed some poor German kid that was trolling all his software.
Oh, really?
Jumped on stage. Yeah.
Whoa. That sounds interesting. Yeah, he's also one of the lead developers behind Systemd and Pulse Audio and other tools on Linux. He works for Red Hat, and he wrote on Google Plus this morning, a massive post talking about how we all talk about how great open source is and the community is, but in actuality, there's a lot of jerks in the communities out there. And what he says, you could apply to the open source community, you could apply to communities around frameworks, you could apply to sports fans. But I thought I wanted to read a bit and get your take on maybe what we can do. He says, I don't usually talk about this very much, and hence I figure that people really are not aware of this. But yes, the open source community is full of assholes, and I probably more than others, am one of their most favorite targets. I get mail for hacking on open source. I get hate mail for it. People have started and stated multiple times petitions on different websites asking me to stop working on open source code. You can go Google for it. Recently, people started collecting bitcoins to hire for a hitman for me. Yes, this really happened. Just the other day, some idiot posted a song on YouTube, a creepy work, filled with expletives about me and suggestions of violence. People post messages and references to artwork in 4chan style, and there's more. A lot more. So he talks about how essentially he gets a lot of hate for flipping bits on a hard drive. It seems a little out of perspective. And I guess when I look at this, I think this is not new. This isn't something that Lennart's just discovering, but it's something we don't talk about a lot. Like we talk about open source and community like it's this magical thing where code comes out of and it's filled with sunshine and happiness. And yeah, there's a few extreme cases, but for the most part, everybody's really great. But you know, I've seen the nasty side of this as well, and I think it's interesting how community can collect around something. It could be a software project, it could be something like an open source core system utility, or it can be a podcast network. And sometimes that community is, and oftentimes, massively beneficial to the company, to the software project when they're starting up. And then sometimes some companies cross a threshold, and now that community starts to turn into a liability. The Twit network is currently struggling with massive trolling after some talent has left the network, and fans have been upset, and there's been websites to document all of the mistakes Twit now makes. There are chat rooms where during Twit live shows, there are alternate chat rooms running where people are, slamming the shows. And the thing is these people actually have some valid complaints. They're not wrong. There are valid issues that people are complaining about, and what's happening is Twit is improperly handling the response to this problem, and they're sort of adding fuel to the fire and offending these people more and more. And it is interesting to watch a community of people who used to love a thing. It could be anything, right? But in this case, it was a podcast network.
Right.
Now turn that love into a very deep anger, where they're going out and they're trolling hosts, they're trolling the shows, they have an active blog with 4 or 5 contributors writing things about Twit every day, and in some ways it seems like Twit really screwed this because you could see it was coming and they didn't handle it properly. But in other ways, it seems like a much too strong of a response. And
well, I mean, I don't know. I have a much, if you look at it from certainly Twit's management perspective, there was definitely a little too big for your britches going on, right? Like, I mean, let's not start the flame war, but certainly, there's the one person who was let go in particular that was popular, right?
Mm-hmm.
But he was also going on every other network with the exception of this one. And, doing little shows there or guest appearances. He was becoming bigger than the actual show.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're Leo Laporte, I think you're absolutely right to either chastise or terminate him. But
I don't think that's why he was let go, though. I think it finally just came down to he wanted more money.
Oh, well then, yeah, he should have been fired for being an asshole.
But
that's exactly the same thing, right?
But that's kind of like, but take it, so say that was his star talent on the network. Now say that's your star developer. Like, this guy's a real rock star. He codes like nobody else. He always seals the deal when it's getting down to the deadline, and he does it like with a smile on his face and professionalism. If you are a development shop that needs somebody like that, that's their business, right? He was their lead anchor. That was their business.
That's a management error, right? You can't have one hero and everybody else is a putz. Because then what happens is the putzes resent if you do compensate the hero more.
Well, you know what happened is I don't think maybe he might have been the lead hitter, but when he left, sort of the other top talent kind of started to leave too. Because I think that old Steve Jobs saying that A players want to work with other A players?
Yeah.
So when you start to lose your A player, then your other A players start to leave too, and then you're just left with nothing but your B players. It's a tight line to walk.
I think it's different. I mean, comparing it to a dev shop is fair only to a point, right?
Okay.
So, for instance, a podcast network has the issue of editorial voice, and certainly that network has an issue of being a little too friendly with the people they cover.
Mm.
Now, a dev shop, you're supposed to be friendly with your customers, so there's no conflict of interest there. I would say that the biggest issue would be like a lack. I don't know. I mean, getting into like things we don't like about other networks is probably not where we want to go.
No, what I kind of want to go with it is, I don't know if it's almost a tale of caution, because what I see happening there could easily happen to a really popular software project, even closed source.
But it happens all the time, right? Like there's a hot app. I'm just going to use apps because it's something I know. People don't get pissed off. And some company comes out and clones it and randomly becomes more popular because they have more marketing money.
Yeah.
This is kind of the way things go. I mean, certainly, I've been one to get upset about it. It doesn't matter, right? Like,
well, it's interesting when the community kind of turns in on you, and when you kind of relied on them before. I don't know. It seems to me like you've lost something there, and it was simply like, it's something you have to manage, but I don't know. I'm still trying to put it into words. To me, it seems like there's a lesson to be learned for software developers that rely on a community, big or large. Just like there's a lesson to be learned for Jupiter Broadcasting to watch Twit.
Well, I also think open source is kind of a whole yes, I think if your software business is based on open source, you know, I'm sure you read it, Chris, all the articles about community managers.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like you do need someone like that, but it needs to be, you know, you're obviously managing a community and trying to get them to do things you want them to do. But maybe you need, in my opinion, having dealt with some open source projects, I would really love it if they removed the trappings of collaboration, right? Like when the corporate vendor obviously is trying to push you in a certain direction, maybe be a little more direct about it.
Yeah,
you know.
it's a fine line to walk, so the community manager isn't the PR mouthpiece. They actually need to be like a community facilitator.
It's tough. I mean, it's really, you know, I have a lot of respect for companies that actually like do it with open source rather than their proprietary, because that is super hard.
Yeah. And I feel, I mean, Lennart has obviously stepped into the spotlight many times, but I feel bad if he's getting death threats. That just seems too far.
Yeah, well, that's the other thing, right? The internet is literally the worst place in the world.
The FBI director this weekend called it the scariest parking lot in the world.
He's got a point, right? It's the Moss Isley of the world.
Yeah. We were talking about it today on the Tech Talk Today post show, too, and it just, yeah, it really is becoming kind of nasty. And in some ways, Twitter is great. It you know, I can connect with folks that I've never talked to before. I've gotten a lot of show guests over Twitter. I've taken some trips thanks to Twitter. But I also get a lot of drive-by crap on Twitter. You know, it's just mean stuff because it's very low energy and effort and risk to send off as something that's maybe you wouldn't normally say to somebody over Twitter. And
I think that's kind of the problem, right? You wouldn't do these things in person. Like if your open source community were people who, you know, you guys met at an office and the company bought pizza and they hung out.
Right.
They would not act this way. And what would happen is if there was a disagreement, the guy wouldn't come the following week.
We just need to have like a common understanding that no arguing on the internet. I know that sounds crazy, but let's just all agree, no arguing on the internet.
Well, you can argue, but maybe you have to argue like in the traditional, you know, rational argument.
Are incorrect because of reasons.
Right, rather than, Lennart, I'm going to go kill your dog.
Right.
Like,
everybody, let's raise some bitcoins to go kill Lennart. Yeah, that seems a little extreme.
I think there's certainly a place for civilized argument, maybe.
I agree. In fact, if you'd like to send in some civilized arguments, please do. Go over to jupiterbroadcasting.com, click the contact link, and choose Coda Radio from the drop-down. Don't forget, you can also go over to our excellent subreddit over at codaradio.reddit.com. That's always where we're looking for a little idea of what you want us to cover. We have feedback threads for each episode, and it's a great way to also just ask a question that our community could answer as well as Mr. Dominic and I. Mike, is there anywhere you'd like to send folks throughout the week?
I'd like to send them to @fingertiptech on Twitter.
Boom! And look at us now that we're here. It looks like our connection is stabilizing a little bit. Go figure. But who knows, right? We should probably end it while we can still hear each other.
We should probably end it while we can hear each other. Yeah.
That would probably be good. All right. Well, don't forget you can also watch us live. For right now, it's going to be Mondays at noon Pacific, 3 p.m. Eastern over at jblive.tv. That could be changing. If it ever did change, I'd tell you how you'd find out. Little pro tip here. jupiterbroadcasting.com/calendar. And it also will convert it to your local time zone. So there you go. Last but not least, I want to thank all of you for joining us and encourage you to grab our RSS feed so that way you just get this show automatically every single week in your favorite podcast catcher. All right, everyone, thanks so much for tuning in this week's episode of Coda Radio. We'll see you right back here next week.